Hey guys, Cronus Falls here, and today I am going to be going in and looking at all of the different artifact sets, reviewing them, and talking about how they could potentially be useful in-game currently or in the future, and what we could potentially do to make these artifact sets useful. So let's go ahead and go in here. If you come into your gear, hit filter and hit this little eye on the top left. You come into this information page, and if you go all the way down to the bottom of this, you see all of the different artifact sets and what they do. So let's go ahead and look at these first two here. So that's going to be life and offense. So life gives plus 15% HP when you have a full set on someone, and offense gives plus 15% attack. Now, offense is useful from early game to end game here, which I feel is not true for either of these sets for one clear reason, and that is because you get Immortal and Cruel gear. So Immortal and Cruel gear are basically exactly the same as these, but with added benefits, and you get so much of it by the time you're in the end game that these two fall off super hard. Unless you have super good pieces in them, you're really not going to want to use them. I would say especially the life set, because there's not that many HP champions in the game, which means you're not going to be using too much Immortal spread around, which means you can use all your best pieces on your HP champs. So life especially, I feel, falls off heavy in the end game. And offense, I mean, there are champions that could use it. Again, Cruel is better though, so 98% of the time you're going to be using Cruel as long as you have it. So these two sets, I would say, definitely good early game, but definitely fall off hard even by the time you're in like the mid to late game, not to mention end game. But let's go ahead and move on here. Now the defense set gives plus 15% to defense. It is pretty good. Basically, defense is one of the best stats in the game, especially for clan boss. So adding 15% defense to your champions is good. I typically don't find that I end up using it a lot because I'm typically looking for speed most of all, or accuracy, or something special like an immunity set, stuff like that. Plus, I just don't have a lot of pieces of defense because Ice Golem gives life and offense and some other sets that just aren't great, so I don't tend to farm it. Ice Golem is considered one of the worst dungeons to farm simply because it doesn't give great end game options. But defense is definitely one that I would say is useful from early game to end game, as long as you can get some good pieces in it. So let's go ahead and move on to critical rate. So the critical rate sets is almost universally useful. I would say that's not true because most champions actually don't want crit rate as much as other things. But it is definitely a useful set when you're gearing someone like a Cold Heart or a Royal Guard, basically any sort of champion that you need to get to 100% crit rate with crit damage gloves on. So basically any nuker at all, crit rate is a very good set for them. 12% is a little low, but I mean, if you can get, let's say, some gauntlets and a weapon in the critical rate set, both of those give 10% crit rate, plus you get this 12%. Well, between those two pieces, you know, you've made up 32% crit rate, which is pretty sweet. So I would say the critical rate set, while a little bit niche, is definitely a viable set and very useful. Let's go ahead and move on to the accuracy set. Now, accuracy is one of the better sets in the game. Tons of champions need accuracy. If you're ever placing a debuff, or if you are doing an effect on a champion like turn meter decrease, you need accuracy. It gives 40 for a set, which is huge. Basically, for anything other than arena, 230 is like the highest you would need to get for any sort of PvE content. So 40 is almost a fifth of that, more like a sixth, I guess, but it's just big, you know. Accuracy, I think it falls off a little bit in the end game. I don't tend to use it as much anymore, except on champions that I want to get really high accuracy. So I would say it is one of the best sets from early game through late game though, and then in end game you will see it fall off, but it is still used for sure. Now let's go ahead and go on to the speed set. So speed set, I would say, is absolutely the best set in the game. Plus 12% speed, that's basically plus 12 speed on any champion. Speed is the biggest factor in this game. And for most games, really, if speed is a stat, that is what you need. The more turns you take compared to your enemy, the better off you are going to do. So plus 12% speed, it's super helpful for even speed tuning like a counterattack team. You can use it to help you get into defense percent boots. Just overall the best set in the game. Let's see what it says here. The higher your champion's speed stat, the quicker their turn meter fills up. Champions with the highest speed stat also get the first turn in battle. Getting the first turn in battle is often the deciding factor in who wins, especially when it comes to arena. Going first means a champion can debuff the enemy, buff their own team, or even take out an enemy threat entirely. That is completely accurate. Speed is just the most important stat in the game. It'll help you win not just in arena, but in dungeons. If you're going 2 times to the enemy's 1, that's super helpful to help you clear it without your champions dying on those stage 20 dungeons. So speed, I would say maybe second best in the game, just because there's divine speed, but divine speed's so much harder to build that speed is typically going to be what you're going to be using. So now let's go ahead and move on to resistance. So this gives plus 40 resistance, and it is a very niche set. Basically, if you are making an arena team that you want to have high resistance so they are not getting debuffed by like a Madame Ceres or something like that, or a Gurgo, you would build resistance sets, and you would try to get your resistance up like above 500, which is only viable for the end game. Honestly, the resistance set is not amazing, but it could be useful, like I said, in very niche situations. I believe this is another one that comes from the Ice Golem. So again, another reason why you typically wouldn't have a whole lot of it, and it's not a great reason to farm the Golem either. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to the last of the basic sets, which is crit damage. This gives plus 20% crit damage on a set, and that is a 2-piece set. It is amazing, especially for champions, like I said earlier, like Cold Heart or Royal Guard. 20% crit damage is huge. So let's see what it says here. When your damage dealers have a consistent critical rate, it's time to start stacking on extra critical damage to increase their total damage output. It's also a good choice for champions whose skills are guaranteed to crit. So yeah, I mean, I would say this doesn't quite capture how good it is, because on champions, like I said, Cold Heart, Royal Guard, anyone who hits on enemy max HP, Seer even, I know she does it based on like the number of buffs you take off and enemy max HP, something like that. Basically anyone in the game who does like serious damage, hundreds of thousands, Septimus for instance, crit damage is the most important stat you could put on them, as long as they have 100% crit rate, and 20% is big, so definitely don't count this set out. It is really helpful to have, especially in the end game when you are trying to speed farm dungeons. So let's go ahead and move on here. So Lifesteal. Lifesteal, I would say, is definitely one of the most important sets in the game. They heal 30% of the damage that they deal, which works with War Master and Giant Slayer. Absolutely amazing set, especially for clan boss. If you're going in there and you don't have a champion like Bad Alcazar or Masha Led placing a consistent leech, you need Lifesteal. You need your champions to be going in there and healing up so that they can last longer into the fight, and therefore you can put out the maximum amount of damage you can do. So Lifesteal, like I said, absolutely one of the most important sets in the game. If you do have one of those champions though, it definitely falls off. Like on my main account now, I have Masha Led doing all of my leech on clan boss, so Lifesteal's really fallen off for me. I don't particularly use it much anymore. But I mean, basically, unless you have one of those champions, it is the most important set from early game to end game for your clan boss team. So let's go ahead and move on to the Destroy set. So the Destroy set decreases the target's max HP by 30% of the damage dealt by the wearer. Now that sounds good in theory, but typically it just doesn't pay off. 30% of the damage you deal is not significant. It's really only helpful against, say, like the Spirit Keep potentially, but it's just so low of a percentage that it doesn't make much of a difference as you're decreasing their max HP. I would say that the only way this set comes into viability, well, I'd say there's two ways. One, a champion who just, or a boss per se, that does not take damage. You just have to decrease their max HP. But I don't know how well that would work out because there's not a lot of champions that do that, and the destroy set would just be mandatory for that boss. So honestly, I don't think that would be a good way to go. Or if you just made it like 80%, then I think it would be viable for something like the Spirit Dungeon or the Spirit Affinity Keep, I mean. Or maybe like Spider or something like that. Something where you need to take down the enemy's max HP, because 30%, it's just going to take forever. That's less than a third of the damage you're doing. And it's just, as it stands, a completely trash set, unfortunately. Hopefully we'll see something in the future, either a buff to the set or some sort of new boss that would make this more viable. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Retaliation set. So this grants the champion a 25% chance to counterattack when attacked by an enemy. When counterattacking, the champion will always use their default skill. So basically, this gives counterattack to your champions. Honestly, not a terrible set. I would say not typically one that is used, but I could see it having its uses. 25% chance to counterattack isn't too much, but if you pair that with like the mastery that lets them have a chance to counterattack when they take a certain amount of damage, then you start to see some sort of value from it. Although that would typically be more useful in like the Spider Dungeon, where you would want to do an AoE counterattacker that has Lifesteal. So you can't do Retaliation and Lifesteal, which means that it wouldn't be too viable, unfortunately. But I could definitely still see some uses for it. Like, let's say a unkillable team, for instance. If you're doing an unkillable team but you don't have a counterattack champion, you could definitely get your champs into Retaliation gear. They would have a 25% chance to counterattack whenever they get hit, which means they could just come back in and get some more damage off for you, some more War Master procs. So I think Retaliation is definitely one that still has some potential in the game and just needs to be explored a little bit more. Let's go ahead and go on to the Fury set. So plus 5% damage for every 10% HP lost, stacked up to 25%. So basically, this is a 4-piece set. It really shouldn't be. Honestly, it's not that useful because in this game, if you're running a nuker champion, either they're at full health or they're dead typically. You don't tend to see your nukers be knocked down to like 50% HP. Basically, if they get hit once in arena, they're dead. If they get hit twice anywhere else in the game, once you're at end game, then they're dead. So you don't see a whole lot of value out of this. I think it should be maybe a 2-piece set. But even then, I don't think it would get a lot of play. So I don't really know. I think this set might just have to be scrapped. Honestly, I don't see a whole lot of use for it. Maybe something like working with Gerptuck, as he's come out now. That could be interesting, make them do some more damage. But overall, yeah, I'm not sure how much use this could really get. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to Curing here. Adds 10% bonus heal to all healing allies used by the wearer. That's a weird way to word that, but I think basically what it's saying is you put it on the person who is healing and it increases their healing by 10% on everyone that they are healing. So again, something that is never used in the game. 10% bonus to healing on a 4-piece set is absolutely useless. If you buff this to like 50%, then I would say you would probably start seeing some people use it. Just getting insane heals coming out of someone like maybe a Zelota or something. Basically, it would need a lot of added bonus because there are plenty of healers in the game that can already heal people up to full. so you don't need this 10% bonus, and you can get way better stuff out of two-piece sets or like a Lifesteal set. I mean, there's just so many different options that curing really doesn't have a place at the moment and needs to be fully reworked in order to make it viable. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Reflex set. This grants the champion a 30% chance to reduce the cooldown of one of their skills by 1 turn. The skill whose cooldown is reduced is completely random. So Reflex is actually a very good set for champions like Stag Knight or Bad El Khazar that only have 1 cooldown ability. Another example of this would be a Skull Crown. But basically, it's pretty niche. I mean, you can get some use out of it, definitely. You can't put it on like a Bad El Khazar and a clan boss team or something like that because it would throw off the rotation. So that's unfortunate. But I would say someone like a Stag Knight could get a lot of value out of Reflex, getting their A2 off more often, getting that AoE decreased defense and decreased attack. Skull Crown could be getting off her big hit on her A2 more often. So I think Reflex is definitely another one that you shouldn't overlook. It does have some good options to go with it, and if you have some good pieces in it, then you might as well give it a try. Let's go ahead and move on here to the Cursed set. This one grants the champion a 50% chance of applying a 50% heal reduction debuff for 1 turn when attacking. So it says particularly useful in the arena when fighting against teams built around constant healing and sustain. That is not true at all. This is not at all useful in the arena. Don't buy that for a second. This is only useful for the Spirit Keep or maybe the Fire Knight. So you can put it on like, I don't know, like a Rosin or something. Go in there, hit 3 times, get that 50% heal reduction. Basically, it's only useful on dungeons where you need to stop the opponent from healing. So, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. There are definitely people who don't have champions who can do that. Like, I didn't have a Cold Heart forever, so I never had heal reduction on the Fire Knight. So, I mean, it's definitely a potentially useful set. I don't think a lot of people get use out of it, though, because they just kind of look past it. And it comes from the Ice Golem, so again, you're not going to be farming much of it, which means you probably don't have good pieces. Same with Reflex, actually. But overall, not a bad set. I think it definitely has its uses in the game, and I think we just need to see more, you know, something where maybe you get some sort of healing on the boss. I don't know. I mean, honestly, we already have 2 bosses in the game that heal, and you need a heal reduction to do your full value against them. And we have plenty of champions who can do it. So I think it's just a niche set. I don't think it's going to be changing, but I do think it has its uses in the game. So overall, not bad. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Toxic set now. So the Toxic set grants the champion a 50% chance of applying a 2.5% poison debuff for 2 turns when attacking. So the Toxic set is pretty decent for like a unkillable clan boss team, something like a 1 Man-Eater, 3 Painkeeper combination where you get the Painkeepers and the Man-Eater into Toxic set. So they're coming out doing these 2.5% poisons. Overall, I think it's really fallen off. It used to be pretty meta for unkillable teams to run this Toxic set, but now that they've been nerfed, not so much. So yeah, again, not too much place in this game. There's so many poisoners out there, so many good ones like Frozen Banshee or Aothar, Kale, even. He's a starter. So Toxic set, definitely not one of the better ones out there and doesn't really fit into the meta at the moment. I would say make this a 5% poison, especially since it's only a 50% chance. And I'm not sure if it has multiple chances of applying per hit. Maybe that's why it has a 2.5% poison instead. Like if a Rosin came in and hit 3 times, I'm not sure if it could place multiple poisons. But I would say just make it 1 chance per skill, make it a 5%. You might see some more value out of it. So now let's go ahead and come down here and look at the Frost set. So Frost set is typically useful in Arena. Grants the champion a 20% chance of applying a freeze debuff for 1 turn when they are attacked by an enemy. So in Arena, you go in, the enemy team goes first. You're running kind of a tankier setup. They set up their nuke, they do their AoE, and then their nuker gets frozen off of you. That's the idea here. Works especially well with provoke champions. Like it says here, this means the set is best used on champion or natural targets for the enemy team, such as those with provoke or taunt debuffs. So basically, I mean, that's what it's used for. You throw it on someone like a Torment, especially in Arena. So he goes out, he does his AoE provoke, they all come in, hit him, and get frozen. It's pretty good. I also was running it on a Stag Knight for a while in the Spider Dungeon, because he was the champion that was taking the hits from the Spiderlings. So they'd come in, hit him, have a 20% chance of getting frozen, so they couldn't come back around and do it again next turn. So it definitely has its uses. I think it's a pretty good set. I wouldn't keep too much of it though. I made that mistake for a while, thinking that it was a great set. I was hoarding pieces of it, and eventually I had to make room, and Frost set had to go. So I would say keep one good set of it. You might find some good uses out of it later in the arena, but overall, definitely not a bad set. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at the Daze set. Grants the champion a 25% chance of applying a sleep debuff for 1 turn when attacking. So sleep is one of the worst CC effects in the game, simply because you can wake them up. So the Daze set is not going to work well on auto. People are going to be waking up the sleeping person constantly. And that being said, I mean, it's not a bad set. If you put it on someone on your arena team and you're manualing it, you're being careful, then it can actually be very good. Like Siffy, for instance, does a sleep on her A1, and it is just amazing when you're going through and doing it on manual. So I would say it's not a bad set, but it's not a good set. I would bump this to, let's see, maybe a 25% chance is okay. Maybe like a 35% chance, a little bit higher, just because sleep isn't as good as something like a provoke or a stun or a freeze, but definitely a decent option, especially in the arena. Now let's go ahead and move down here to immunity set. So immunity comes from the Fire Knight that applies a block debuffs buff on the wearer for 2 turns at the start of every round. It's really good. I did a video on Madame Ceres recently where I showed her off in immunity gear, and it has been absolutely amazing. I don't have to worry about her freezing herself off of her passive where she puts a shield on herself against a Torment. So, I mean, it's good for that. And it's good in general. I mean, if you can't get debuffed, then you don't die nearly as easily. If there's no decreased defense on you, then you're not dying as easily. If there's no decreased speed or stun or something like that on you, then you get more turns off. Overall, very good set. I would say it's a little situational, usually used in arena, not so much in dungeons and such, but it's not bad for dungeons either. Like if you're going into the Dragon's Dungeon with a Madame Ceres, and you have her in immunity gear for the dragon, or for the arena rather, then she's still going to get some value out of it there. Like if a Tyrell goes in for his AoE decreased defense from the enemy waves, then she's not going to get it. She's going to survive easier. So overall, just a pretty good set, and I would definitely recommend farming up some of it from the Fire Knight. It's definitely an end game arena set for sure, as are several of the things from Fire Knight. So definitely a good set with a good place in the game currently. Let's go ahead and take a look at Avenging. Grants the champion a 30% chance to counterattack when attacked by an enemy with a critical hit. Similar to the Retaliation set, this set is best used on champions with strong effects or debuffs on their default skills. So this set is absolutely trash. So the reason for that is it's a 30% chance to counterattack when attacked by an enemy with a crit, which I mean I guess is a higher chance for arena, but you're not going to use Retaliation set in arena anyways typically. But the issue is I think Retaliation was already like a 25% chance. Yeah, 25% chance when being attacked, period. So it's a 5% chance increase, but with the caveat that it has to be a critical hit. It's just not very useful, especially in PvE content. You're going through dungeons, there's a very low chance you're going to get crit. It's like 15%. So Retaliation set is 100 times better than the Avenging set, and I don't keep any of it. If I get it, Avenging set just goes in the trash. I think they should just remove this set from the game. It really serves no purpose, and just leave the Retaliation set in. maybe buff it to a 30% chance and just leave it as B. So let's go ahead and move on here to the shield set. So the shield set's actually really good. Another thing from Fire Knight that's really good in Arena. It's also great for dungeons and faction wars. Basically, you come in there with a shield buff where 30% of the wearer's max HP on all allies for 3 turns at the start of each round. I mean, it's just a lot of extra health. You know, you throw that on someone like a Sir Nick and you have him at 100k HP. You're coming in there and just basically giving a 30,000 shield onto all of your allies. Obviously, that's going to be an extreme case, but even if you're coming in there with someone with 40k HP, you know, you're still giving them like a 13,000 shield. So very good set. It also stacks, like it says here, if multiple champions on the same team have shields set, the value of the shield buff from the artifact sets will stack. So if you come in there with 2 champions with a shield set, like is sometimes common in Arena, like top end high resist teams will come in there, they'll have like a Sir Nick with a shield set and a Warlord with a shield set, and they'll just be like insane 50,000 shields that they're coming in with. So shield set, definitely good. It keeps your teams alive longer in dungeons and in Arena. I mean, unless you have buff removal, those are really hard to get through. So shield set, definitely a great set, and I would recommend farming some of that up and using it for your dungeons and or faction wars, as well as Arena if you're going for kind of a tankier strategy. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Stalwart set. So Stalwart decreases the incoming damage from AoE attacks on the wearer by 30%. So it says this set is potentially good as a reserve set for your dungeon teams who have to deal with powerful AoE attacks from the bosses. I would say no to that. Stalwart is not meant for dungeons, but rather for high-end clan boss teams. So if you do have one of those champions I mentioned earlier, like Bad Elkazar, Masha-led, champions that make it to where you don't need Lifesteal, then Stalwart is the set for you. You come in, you take 30% less damage from those big hits from the boss. It'll help you survive a whole lot longer, and it is used to do some of the strongest clan boss teams out there. So I would definitely say Stalwart set, while being mostly for endgame players, does have a good place in this game and is a set that's worth keeping if you get good pieces in it. Let's go ahead and move on to Frenzy here. So Frenzy is a 4-piece set. The wearer's turn meter will increase by 10% for every 5% HP lost from each hit of an enemy attack. So I mean, it's not the worst set in the world. I just don't really see using it often. Like I said, your nukers are going to probably die if they take a big hit, and your other champions, like let's say a turn meter booster or someone that this would actually be really useful for, they would rather have the speed sets so that they can get around to their turns faster without the condition of getting hit. So honestly, Frenzy set, while not a terrible set, doesn't have a big place in the game currently. It basically does what a speed set does, but worse. Let's see, but how could we make it usable? Maybe instead of 10% for every 5% HP lost from a hit of an enemy attack, maybe like 2% for every 5% HP that you deal. That would be really good. Like for a nuker, if you could come in, do an AoE, you kill the enemies, like you're in Arena, you kill 3 of them. So that would be, what? That would be 300% at 2% per 5. So let's do some math here real quick. That'd be 120%. So if you killed 3 enemies, you would get an extra turn. I mean, it would be pretty good. At that point, you could come in, do another hit with your nuker. That might be a little bit broken, maybe 1% for 5% you deal. But it would be incredibly strong at that point. And I think something like that would be a lot more useful in the game than something that boosts your turn meter for taking damage instead. Now let's go ahead and move on to the Regeneration set. Heals the champion by 10% of their max HP at the start of their turn. This is best used on champions who are hard to take down, but pose significant threat to the enemy team. Regeneration is not a great set. It basically does something similar to Immortal, but without the extra health. So it's typically not used. It's completely replaced by Immortal. And honestly, I don't think it needs to be reworked. I think it just needs to be removed. It has no place in the game currently, and yeah, it's just not a good set. Let's go ahead and move on. Take a look at Stun here. So Stun grants the champion an 18% chance of applying a stun debuff for 1 turn when attacking. Stun sets are best used on champions with multiple AoE attacks to give them the highest chance of locking down an enemy champion. Stun set is amazing. I've thrown it on my Torment recently. Sunset Bellowers are all the rage these days as far as progressing through dungeons goes. It's just a great set. You pair that with the Mastery and the Defense tree that gives an extra 5% chance to stun. And so you have a 23% chance to stun on every hit. You, like it says, put it on champions like a Bellower or a Torment have multiple AoE attacks. You get a lot of stuns out, just a ton of CC, especially on a Torment who already does CC on his AoE attacks. So a great set for both arena and dungeons and faction wars, and just good overall. Let's go ahead and move on to Relentless here. So Relentless, it was nerfed a little bit recently, but it grants the champion an 18% chance of getting extra turn immediately after their turn. So this is a very good set. They changed it so that if you proc an extra turn off of your own ability, it cannot stack. Because you used to be able to get 2 extra turns in 1 turn, which I mean, I think they did it because Rotos was so strong and they wanted to nerf him without actually nerfing him. But instead, they really just nerfed all the other champions that weren't as strong, and Rotos is still just as crazy as ever. But, I mean, Relentless set is really good. Taking more turns is always good, and I would say, I mean, if you had the Relentless to get on most of your champions, it would probably be worth it. Taking more turns, like I said, is just amazing. And it is a great set overall. Most people don't have that much, though. So it's typically best reserved for a champion like a Rotos or a Robar. Basically champions who are already taking extra turns, because the more turns you take from your abilities, the higher chance you get to proc the Relentless. Because each turn, you know, you have another turn to try and proc it. So overall, just a very good set and can really snowball a fight for you. Let's go ahead and move on to Savage. So with Savage, each attack from the wearer ignores 25% of the target champion's defense when attacking, which is absolutely amazing. Again, for champions that do enemy max HP damage like Septimus, Coldheart, Royal Guard, it just makes them hit insanely hard. So Savage set, it's basically in there to do stuff like one-shot the spider with that Septimus, Bad L, Gerp Tuck combo. Yeah, I mean, that's about it. That's his place in the game. I think it's definitely worthy of being in there. Doesn't really need to be reworked as far as I'm concerned. So let's go ahead and move on to Taunting. So Taunting grants the champion a 30% chance of applying a Provoke debuff for 1 turn when attacking. This is actually a pretty good set, although you won't see it used too often. 30% chance of placing a hard CC effect is actually very good. 35% if you get that Mastery. So, I mean, overall, pretty good set. It gives you some good CC. Be really good with champions who have some sort of passive, like maybe... first of all, it would be good on champions with an AoE attack. And then maybe like on a Torment or someone that is either really tanky or has a passive that could potentially provide like a freeze or a stun or something like that when they're hit. So a hard CC like this with a 30% chance is always a pretty good option. Now let's go ahead and move on to the Cruel set. So like I said, this set is what typically replaces the attack set later in the game. And so it gives that 15% attack plus ignores 5% of enemy defense. It's a great set for nukers. You know, you can get 3 sets of this on them, so they're ignoring 15% of enemy defense plus 45% attack. I mean, it's just a great set overall, and you get a lot of it as you go through the game, taking down the clan boss every day. So not really more to say on that. The Immortal set replaces the Life set. It does the 15% HP, but also heals by 3% every turn. So this is why I said that the, Regeneration set is no good, because it's a 4-piece set. If you put 2 sets of Immortal on them instead, you heal by 6% instead of 10%, but you get an extra 30% HP. So that's why this set just absolutely replaces both that and life. It's great on champions like Miscreated Monster, who already have a ton of HP. They can heal every turn and just absolutely snowball off of it. So Immortal is definitely a great set, although not quite as often used as some others I've found, at least for me. Maybe other people use it more often, but still very good for sustaining very tanky champions. Let's go ahead and move on to Divine Life here. So Divine Life plus 15% HP, plus 15% HP self-shield for 3 turns. This is basically like the life set, but it gives you a bit of a shield at the start of each round. I mean, it's a good set. It's just not as good as Immortal, I would say, and it's harder to get because you can only get it from Arena. So overall, not the best set, not the worst set, just kind of average. Let's go ahead and move on to Divine Offense. Again, just like the offense set, but gives a 15% HP shield. Again, worse than Cruel, but not bad overall. I would say, as far as the Divine sets go, this one's probably the worst, just because attack is not that important in the game compared to all the other stats. Let's go ahead and move on to Divine Critical Rate. Crit rate plus 12%, plus 15% HP self-shield for 3 turns. So it's basically a crit rate set. I mean, all of these are basically going to be slightly better than their base set counterparts, but a lot harder to get. So I'd say overall they rank worse just because it's hard to build good set bonuses out of them. With Divine Speed being really, really good, I would say it is better than Speed, but again, just hard to build. The pieces that I do have, though, I definitely use. It is an amazing set. Go ahead and move on to Swift Parry. So this is one of the new sets that are only available to Platinum players. So it gives plus 18% speed, which sounds insane, but it's a 4-piece set, so it's actually less than 2 speed sets combined. But it also gives plus 30% critical damage, so that's really good for champions like Cold Heart or something, where you want some speed, you want some crit damage, you know. Let's say you're only going to get 2 set bonuses. You could get 1 set speed, 1 set crit damage, or you could get 1 set Swift Parry, and it would do better than the 2 of those. You'd get an extra 6% speed, plus an extra 10% crit damage, plus a 50% chance of being unkillable when hit with a fatal hit. So overall, a very good set for Arena. Obviously, not a lot of people can get it, and I mean, you only get it once a week. You have to hope to get good pieces. So very difficult to get a good setup with it, but it is an amazing set. Onto Deflection. So Deflection plus 20% HP, plus 20% defense, 25% chance to deflect 1 debuff onto attacker. So, I mean, this is a very good set as well. If you were going to put on a life set and a defense set, then you're getting better than both of those combined. Plus a 25% chance to deflect 1 debuff onto the attacker. So let's say you get hit by a Stag Knight. You have a chance to deflect that decreased defense onto him instead. So, I mean, I would say maybe not as good as the Swift Parry set, but still pretty good. Definitely good for very tanky Arena setups. I wouldn't say it has a whole lot of utility outside of Arena, but overall still a pretty good set. So that's going to be it for today, guys. I hope this is helpful to you in deciding what kind of gear you want to keep, where you could potentially use it, and maybe how we could hopefully move forward in the game to make them useful in the future. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below or join the Discord if you have anything you'd like to talk about. I'm always happy to help give you guys advice, and thanks for watching.